Today we've got Katherine Dodds. She's representing the movie The Corporation. It's one of my favorite documentaries. It was one that right when I was really starting to get into documentaries and becoming more aware of corruption and my surroundings and what was going on in the world, it was one that really caught my attention and stayed with me. After all these documentaries I've watched, all the hours and hours of documentaries, it's one that still, I can honestly say, it's still one of my favorites, and we'll talk more about it, and hopefully you enjoy it. The quality starts a little rough because I think the Wi-Fi connection was a little weak, and then it got better, and we did just audio instead of a video episode. So unfortunately, if you guys want to see a video episode, my bad, there's no video episode of this one. It's just audio, but it's still an awesome show. It ends up going for, I don't know, an hour and a half or whatever it is, or close to that. So enjoy the show. It's an awesome show. She's super interesting. We talk about her history. The show actually starts off with her getting into her link to the film and how she got involved and all that. So that's where we're going to start off once you hear her talking. Also, I want to apologize to Kat because I told her I would pause, or she asked me to pause and I didn't, but that's how we roll. We don't edit anything. So it's all natural. It's what you hear is exactly what happened during the interview. So we've had people get phone calls. We've had people, I think, eat during the podcast. So it's unedited, and sorry, Kat. Hopefully you don't get mad at me. I also want to thank everybody who's been listening. I really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate everybody who's been supporting the podcast, sharing it, all the friends I've made from the guests. I've made so many awesome friends from guests that I still stay in contact with, and people who really appreciate the fact that I'm trying my best to share some interesting information and documentaries and people, and hopefully soon more musicians and comedians and stuff like that. And anything I'm into, I'm going to try to get people from that realm and that genre, and try to get people on the show. So look forward to that. And I really appreciate everybody, all the subscribers, everybody who downloads. Our downloads are still very good. And even though I don't release shows as much as I have in the past, for people who don't know, I have a 9 to 5. Well, it's really a 7 to 4 job, which sucks big balls, and it's really. If anything, I guess it makes it easier for me to relate to my listeners, because most of us have a crappy job that we probably have to do and don't really have a choice, and really kind of is a bummer. So I'm glad that I get to do this podcast, but unfortunately, we all have responsibilities and priorities, and I want to give you something to listen to while you're going to your job. Hopefully that is entertaining and somewhat thought-provoking, and the same way podcasts do the same for me. When I'm going hour or 2 hours for a drive for work, it helps the day go by to put on a podcast and listen to it and give me something that's either funny or thought-provoking and interesting in some way. So hopefully I'm doing the same for everybody else. But I am in the real world, and sometimes if the podcast, if I seem like I'm not focused or whatever, I mean, one, I'm only human. I do have issues with nervousness and anxiety at times. It's amazing. You wouldn't think that somebody who's played music on a stage and runs a construction company and goes to meetings and stuff, but I'm still that kid from high school who has some nervousness and anxiety, and it definitely shows at times. So I'm doing my best to try to calm that down. And I think with all the shit that happens in real life, then you sit down and you try to focus on what you want to talk about and who the guest is. It's just it's hard to kind of just calm my nerves down, and sometimes I'm worried about my energy levels, so then I drink a bunch of coffee and then I'm all fucked up because I just can't even gather my thoughts. So I'm in other words, I'm just going to do my best to try to work on all that stuff. And in the summer, at the height of construction season, it's going to be hard to keep putting out shows as often as I usually do, but I'm going to do my best to keep fitting them in and give you good quality shows in the same process. So I apologize if I have some shitty shows. I know I definitely have some shows that were awesome, like the one with Dr. Gregory Smith and Dr. Brzezinski and Ben Bolin and Adam Scorgi and Guy Evans and James Corbett. I've had tons of awesome shows, and hopefully you guys really enjoy those. And if there's other ones that are a little rocky, I don't mean to make this intro a diary, but I definitely are trying to do my best to try to work on those things. I'm aware of my flaws and things that I can work on, like the stuttering I'm doing right now. But and also podcast apps. Everybody who listens to podcasts, I'm sure you guys would probably appreciate my favorite podcast app, which is a Podcast Addict. I don't get shit from them. They're not a sponsor, but it's just an awesome podcast app, and it just makes it really easy. It's on Android. It makes it really easy just to download, keep up with what you downloaded, keep up with how far you're in each episode, and it's just every issue you could possibly have with any podcast app, they seem to fix it, because I think I've downloaded it before and it sucked, and now it's pretty good. So it's actually not pretty good. It's awesome. They did an awesome job with it. So props to those guys to make it easier for us to listen to this shit. So what else? I think that's about everything. If you want to support the show, obviously, check out Theory 6 Music, and I think that's about everything. Do that and keep listening, and I'll keep trying to bring you interesting, awesome shows, and I got guests lined up and some more really interesting people. So I hope you guys are enjoying this stuff. So till next time, peace.
Well, my hands, so I hold still in this pit of regret. I am filled.
Well, my history with the film goes back from before it was even in production, even before it was started, and that was with the film Manufacturing Consent. And that was Mark Akbar and Peter Wentonic's previous film, which had been a huge Canadian box office success as well. And it was looking at, they followed Noam Chomsky around for 5 years in that film. And that film was the turning point for me as a student at the time, or just graduated, hanging out on campus still. And that's when I realized that if you wanted to be an activist, you had to be involved in media. I was already familiar with Noam Chomsky's ideas and critique of media, but the film really showed me that in order to be part of the battleground, you had to actually be doing media too. And that's what got me started and pretty much changed my career. Before that, I was trying to be a painter, living in a co-op house, trying to live without plastic, all good things.
Yeah.
But then I started getting involved with community television, started doing a lot more writing. I'd always done that, but that became more of what I was up to, and moved to Vancouver, where I got a job with Adbusters magazine. So that's how I met Mark, because I'd seen the film, him and Peter's film, and I'd actually met Peter at that screening. But then I ended up on a panel with Mark at some event, and that was the beginning of us becoming friends. And then when he and Joel first started the initial conversations about the corporation, which would have been almost, I would say, 15 years ago, those conversations started. I was around and really basically just said, I want to be part of whatever happens with this. So that's the long answer. The more soundbite version of that story, I like to say, is I got into media because of Manufacturing Consent and its scathing critique of modern media. Then I got into running a business because of the corporation. We formed a company in order to do the promotion for the film. And this was a new venture for me as well, one which we still continue to do. So that's Hello Cool World. And the other irony there is that I think it was working, being influenced by Naomi Klein's No Logo and getting to work with Avi Lewis, her partner, and her on various projects as well, that made me realize that it's the same with branding. Branding has to be, we can't let it go. We can't leave it to the corporate powers that be. Yeah,
definitely. Well, Manufacturing Consent's a huge influence on a lot of people. I mean, it's a really long documentary, so I think you probably, when it came out, people had probably a higher attention span than they do now. Now it's just, I think we're so constantly distracted. We're not used to paying attention to one thing for too long. But that was an awesome movie, and it really exposed people to the work of Edward Bernays and just marketing and really how it brainwashes people, and you use the best scientists, the best psychologists to know exactly what buttons to push to get us to buy things, to get us to want things, and even how marketing's changed from before it was more focused on trying to sell you the product, and now it's more focused on trying to sell you how the product makes you feel and things like that. And so that's a really interesting film. I remember it took me quite a few tries to get through the whole thing, but it's a really good. And Noam Chomsky's a great mind. He's a credible person who speaks out about these issues, and I think that for the mainstream person who thinks maybe it's a conversation about conspiracy or corruption or brainwashing, he kind of gives it credibility, and so that's awesome. And so now you're focused on the campaign because it's a 10-year anniversary of the corporation. I just had Adam Scorgi on not too long ago, another Canadian filmmaker who did The Union, The Business Behind Getting High, and we were talking about how the corporation, how awesome of a film it was, and 2004, it was really like after September 11th, and people started becoming more aware, and you know, this was one of the first documentaries for me personally that really changed my perspective on things. You know, it was one of there's a small group like that. This one, Loose Change was another one, and there's a bunch of them that just completely changed my outlook on life, and really let you know that holy shit, there's more to this than meets the eye. You know, while we're kind of these machines that we're just going to work, you know, consuming things, and there's people who are focusing on trying to get messages across to us and stuff like that. So I think that was really important. So now with the 10-year anniversary, what do you guys have planned?
Well, the idea right now is that we've never needed it more. When we look back at the film, it seems really shocking that it was 10 years because it doesn't feel 10 years old. It feels more like it was prophetic. It was pre-2008 with the financial crash. It came out. It was one of the films we know in part inspired the Occupy movement. All of these things much more current. And then we see things only getting worse in terms of the infringements over citizens' rights, essentially, and being played out in every area of our lives and coming to light in particular, I think, with a lot of the surveillance issues and NSA spying. We really are in a world where governments are supposed to be working for us, and more we see so many ways in which they're not. And in particular, how corporations are trying to, you know, it used to seem like conspiracy theory to say that corporations are trying to control the world, but it seems fairly clear that that's exactly what their plan is. So we really need this film more than ever to spark a movement. And my feeling is that we had the beginnings of that when it first launched, but we didn't actually have the resources to do more follow-up after, you know, seeing through the DVD launch. This has been a voluntary labor of love and obsession on my part for the past 8 years, because what money we did have is long gone. So what we hope to happen with this new campaign is to crowdfund and being able to, our first small tangible goal is to gift the film free to 1,000 schools. I think if we can do that across North America, especially if we're able to do that by making contact with educators and teachers and keeping in touch with how they use the film. We've had some great examples of that, but they've been very random. You know, so if we could launch a campaign where we really did that, I think it could have a huge impact. And at the same time, one of the gifts or perks that we'll be offering to people who donate at the $100 level is they get their own downloadable copy of the new cut of the film, which speaks to your, it's a long film. The corporation was also a long film. Well, now it's half an hour shorter, the version that we're going to be relaunching. So that screener will come for use by activists with an unlimited public screening license, which has never been offered before. So it's twofold. We want communities and we want educators to use the film. But we're calling on people to support our efforts in doing so, so that we can really re-engage with these audiences. We had a wonderful situation occur when the film first launched, which, as you can dimly remember, back in the day before Facebook, before Twitter, before most of what we know of as social media existed, all we had was email. And we did something crazy. We had an email list go from 0 to 60,000 in a matter of a couple of weeks. And but now we know that millions of people have seen the film, and we would like there to be a way to re-engage with people so that we can have more dialogue, and in particular be able to mobilize around these issues more than we have been able to in the past, since the film launched, essentially. And in particular also to work with groups who are doing something about that. So in essence, this relaunch is about telling the world we're here again. We need some support, but once we get that support, what we want to do is really give back and find a way to sustain ongoing efforts so that we can have an impact, because we think we can make an impact on the corporate forum, but not alone. We need to be working with lots of people around the world to do that.
Yeah, and I think the film, like you said, it came out after the or before the Occupy movement and a lot of other like events that's happened since then, and I think it came out before people were more aware of what was going on too. I think now people seem to be, they seem more aware of their surroundings. I think, you know, obviously Facebook, Twitter, all these, you have all these options to get information, and now you don't have to just watch mainstream media, which unfortunately is kind of in control by whoever markets there, the commercials. I mean, they all have an influence on what they show on their news. I mean, you saw with the Malaysia thing where CNN did 2 months of speculation on where they might think the plane is, and it wasn't even real news. So, but the cool thing is we do have the internet to kind of look things up and get stories across and share. So it definitely, I feel like the movie, like you said, is just as important today as it was when it came out, if not more important. And so I think that's awesome. For somebody who doesn't know the film or isn't familiar with it, what would be the message, or what do you, how would you, and I guess it probably have to be a long answer, how would you explain the movie and what the message is?
Well, I'd say in essence it's a film that, instead of just looking at cases of corporate harm as one-offs, as one bad apple, it takes a look at the entire institution, puts the nature of the corporation on the couch, and uses that strange legal fiction that says corporations are people under the eyes of the law, which is a much more common idea now. It wasn't when the film first came out. But this crazy idea that corporations are people, the filmmakers asked, what kind of person is it, if it's a person? And the diagnosis, after going through the list of all of the DSM diagnostic markers, was, well, the corporation is a psychopath. And so I think that really is at heart what the point of the film is. So we can, and the film does go through many cases of examples of how this works with corporations, why, in fact, they are so harmful. But it goes right back to this notion that this psychotic, or this psychopathic behavior of the corporation is the inability to form lasting relationships, the inability to empathize, the inability to truly feel any guilt. And if you know anything about psychology, the psychopaths are the one that you can't cure. They have to be controlled. So I think that's a really strong message, that we can't just expect corporations to do good, even if some people in them do, if we don't question and really combat its very form of its DNA, as it were. So I think that's the core message. If you were to try to soundbite what's a 2-hour film with many, many examples and essay style, still very entertaining. I would urge those of you who haven't seen it, if you described what the corporation is just in terms of how it was structured, it might not sound as fast-moving as I think it really is. And that was one of the other interesting, surprising outcomes of the film launch, is how popular it was when it was really hard to fund, you know, at the beginning, because people didn't necessarily think. I don't know if Mark would have gotten it funded if he hadn't had the track record of manufacturing consent, which was also a very long essay film. So I think it shows a couple of things. One, there's an appetite for this, and that people do like real analysis and deep ideas in their documentaries. They don't all just have to be the traditional follow a few characters and see how it turns out model. There's nothing wrong with that, but it certainly wouldn't cover this kind of topic. But the way it's crafted and edited together, that is what makes it, I would dare even say, fun to watch at many times. There's a lot of laughing when people watch the film. But its really hard-hitting message is that if we don't do something about the corporate form itself, we will constantly just be chipping away at little bits of messes that they make, and one corporation or another in particular. And that's one of the reasons that I think this campaign is really important. If we can bring enough people together, we might be able to, I used to call it the 3 R's, the rewrite, regulate, and reform. And I think that we had a faux debate about that when we first launched the DVD. But the truth is, we have to do all of them. We can't leave any of one of those out. And what I mean by rewrite is goes right back to change corporate charters. Like let's make it so they cannot cause this kind of harm. And in terms of the analysis within the film, that corporate harm is really because when this legal structure is set up the way it is in the charters, they are bound to maximize profit for their shareholders. And the problem with that is that anything that gets in the way of that this phrase externalize. They're able to externalize the harms they cause, and that could be harms to the environment, harms to animals, harms to people. And when they've externalized them, just like the word sounds, it pushes them out of their sphere of accountability. And that is why it is so dangerous, because if it affects the bottom line, they feel they are not only allowed to ignore these harms, but they're bound to, because they can't jeopardize the profit for their shareholders. So that is the fundamental flaw that we have to address in terms of changing the corporation. And that brings me to the second, R of this, which is reform. So this would where all the corporate social responsibility folks would land. And while I applaud many of their efforts, and a lot of there's one of the characters in the film, Ray Anderson, he's since passed away, but he is the CEO of Interfor, and he had an environmental revelation, and he swore to make sorry, I think I've got the name of his company wrong. The carpet guy, Ray Anderson, the carpet guy. Interface, yeah, I'm confusing it. Interface Carpets, Ray Anderson from Interface. But anyway, he read Paul Hawkins' book and had this ecological interface and real ecological moment of conversion, as you were, to the environmental side. And he restructured his entire company. And he really tried to, he made it his life's mission to do that. And I'm sure that he succeeded in part, and I'm sure the company is still following that on. But it still does beg the question, he was able to do that because he's still a majority shareholder. Even though it's a publicly traded company, he is a majority shareholder. If you have a publicly traded company where the person with the moral vision is not the majority shareholder, you're stuck. Your shareholders can change your own policy. They can affect how you make decisions, and that is something that I think that small business people don't understand necessarily, or those of us crazy artists who aren't used to running businesses. That when you have multinationals operating at this level, the person who's even got the power doesn't even have the power at the end of the day, and there is an agenda of complete control over their own markets. They will only give that up if they're forced to, which is the last of those R's, which is regulate. And one, I know Joel feels very strongly about, one of the filmmakers, because even though governments seem to be in bed with corporations to such a degree, at the same time, we have to not give up on the democratic institutions that exist, because it would be very hard to start over from scratch, even if we're disillusioned by politics and politicians, and believe me, I am. But at the same time, if we don't involve ourselves in holding governments accountable to holding corporations accountable, what is really left? Because there's a lot of power there, and we see that when certain things are challenged, and that's playing out in the war and peace industries and in the resource extraction industries right now. There's serious implications to messing with their business plans. And I feel like this is why we have to work together. It's not just conspiracy theorists over in the fringes. It's pretty common knowledge now that things are not happening in a democratic way. People are even being killed because of some of these ideas. And that's because corporations are feeling like the bottom line is sacred. Their bottom line is sacred, instead of the long-term effects on the planet, on people.
Yeah, well, I think when money trumps morals, we have an issue. I mean, you can only rape the world of its resources for so long until eventually, you're out of one resource and you move on to another. You see it with fracking. You see it with with oil drilling. You see it, and the big issue, and the one thing you mentioned about the film, which I completely agree, is that even though it's hard to describe the film and get the message across about how entertaining it is, because it has a lot of really good little stories. It has the Monsanto story, has the guy who worked for a corporation that basically you set up a fake interview so you could get some extract some information from. Yeah. So it was just all these good little stories that really make it super interesting. And so it's hard because when you explain it, it is hard to kind of let people know how entertaining it is. But in Michael Moore, he made a good point when he was talking to the CEO of Nike, and he says something that I say a lot too. When is enough enough? I say the same thing. It's you make $8 billion one year. Why do you need to make $10 billion next year? Why do you need to make $20 billion next year? Like it's an addiction. It's a psychological issue that most of us just kind of brush off and say, hey, you know, they're just trying to make money. But I think that we don't look at it as it really is an addiction. It's addiction to money, and they're trying to fulfill some emptiness probably that they're never going to fulfill with this temporary happiness of getting money. They realize it's not enough, and they try to get more. So it just it's a huge issue, and I like the fact that you also mentioned governments, because the movie isn't just focusing on big bad corporations. It really is an issue with everybody. I mean, you guys talk about government corruption in the movie. You talk about you know, how basically they're in bed together, you know, corporations and politicians, and so it's not just one or the other, it's both. And I think that it goes to the root issue of greed. Wherever there's money to be made, there's going to be greedy people that are going to try to extract money. It doesn't matter if it's churches, unions, corporations, and I think that if somebody greedy will get involved and find a way to cut corners, or like this in the movie, they told a story about putting a chemical that was unsafe, but the fines probably are less than, you know, the money they make, the quick money. I mean, GM had that issue recently with the ignition that they had. They didn't want to do a recall on. They didn't do it's okay. They didn't do a recall on it because it was just a bad business decision. And when you start looking at people's lives, I think 13 people died to direct link to that ignition issue. When you start looking at everything as a business decision, you're going down a pretty dangerous road. And so I like the fact that, you know, that you mentioned that, because I think that maybe somebody who's a capitalist or somebody who, you know, might look at it and be like, oh, that's just a liberal movie focus, you know, but it's not. I think that even though it's called the corporation, I think it's the root issue is greed. And when you have a entity that the only purpose for it to exist is to make money, it's not to, you know, to help people, or in the process, if it does that, it might be a plus. But for the most part, if they can cut corners or put something, you know, you guys had the story about Monsanto and then putting antibiotics in their in the cows, and how, you know, basically we could get to a point where somebody could have a staph infection and die because we're so immune to antibiotics. So these are all real issues, and I think that the thing about public companies is that it's all about short-term gains. You know, when you talked about small businesses, and I actually get to see things from both lights, because we actually have a family-owned construction company. So I'm in the corporate world for my full-time job, and then I also do music, and I do this podcast, and so I see things from, and people would be like, oh, you've never owned a business, you don't know, and it's like, well, I do, and I know what it's like, and I'm constantly surrounded by people who will cut corners and screw whoever it takes to make an extra buck. And that's, you know, and that's in a small, you know, we're a smaller business, and that's in, you know, in our small business, in our group of companies we deal with. I could just imagine a big, you know, big companies like Halliburton and KBRs, and, you know.
Well, and if you are your own corporation, like I am as well, and the film Big Picture Media Corporation is the corporation behind the corporation, and my company's Good Company Communications Incorporated. But when you have only one person in charge, we're you know, bluntly put, we're free to lose as much money as we want. I mean, obviously we need to survive if we're going to keep a business going, so I understand that as well, but that's not really what the analysis points out. It really, and this is why, you know, it's not that every form of doing business is wrong. It's what corporations have become with the size of them, and with the publicly traded issue. That's really what makes this DNA of them so dangerous, because you're not just externalizing the harms you cause, you're externalizing the accountability in the internal workings of the large corporation as well. So you get these corporate crimes that occur, and you can't find anybody to prosecute. And they also just factor in, the GM is a perfect case, they just factor in the costs of paying off their mistakes. So it's really, there has to be stronger regulations. That's where I feel like we can't just give up on government. But if government is being lobbied by corporations and all this money is going into that, which is why issues like Citizens United are so important to deal with and to fight back against, because if corporations can buy government, that is really the end of democracy. So I think we need to be fighting back for democracy as well as for alternative movements and alternative ways to envision business. I've been quite inspired by some of the stuff that's coming out of more progressive business think tank folks. Things like the concept of the triple bottom line, where you actually take into account, you bring back the things you're externalizing and talk about environmental harms and the cost, the true cost of what you do if you cause pollution or you do these things. But when they then just turn that around and just greenwash it, that is where that's not enough. There has to be regulations as well. And there are people, there's the B Corporation idea that's come out that is an interesting idea too. It's about a new legal corporate charter that allows you to bake in your ethical values into the corporation as well. Again, that wouldn't really matter unless you sold it. But for example, things like Ben and Jerry's, if they were able to make the brand locked into a point of view that can't be changed if the company is sold, that's what a B corporation could accomplish. But in a recent discussion, Joel pointed out, how effective is this unless we regulate? What if we were to say, this is a great way to be thinking about corporations. Why don't we make all corporations required to have another way of yeah. So the 2008 financial crash was an interesting moment because for the first time it revealed that some people had been saying all along, but that economics is essentially, it doesn't exist. It's a philosophy. It's invented. But for the first time, talking about economics is sexy amongst activists. In my long activist career, talking about money and economics was just, it was not a hot topic. Now we've been sort of forced into that, and there's two sides to that. One is the dangerous situation that the world is in with the precarious situation with the financial crisis. But the other is an opportunity to rethink economics. I'm not sure that's what's happening, but that's what I hope and wish and should be happening, is to rethink how we define that in and of itself, which could have a huge impact on the way corporations do business. Because the reason we got into this mess is all of these critiques of the corporate form taken to their extreme. It's just so based in short-term money grabs by the elite. And then the second thing from that, the Occupy Wall Street concept came out of the crash, obviously, as well. And I think what's interesting now is, the tents are long gone, and some people say it's over, but I don't think it's anywhere over. I think what's happened is the concept of the 99% has reached the mainstream, and that is a powerful moment that could be built on to create some real change, because people have an innate, just as corporations are forced to be evil profit machines, people do have an innate sense of justice that has been very offended by this deepening inequality. And it's making a lot of instability in the world. And it's those cracks that enable things you didn't expect to happen, which I think I would like to see come out of all of this sort of financial soul searching that some people are doing, and a way to really, nobody would argue with the fact that there needs to be some alternatives at this point. So it might be a good time to start really exploring them. But to do that, we're going to have to fight back against this grab and run mentality that corporations, especially in the resource extraction industry, have. It's almost like make as much as possible and get out of there before it's gone or it's too late or someone stops us.
Yeah, what do you think of ideas like the resource-based economy, like the Zeitgeist movement and things like that? There's a couple other ones that are trying different ideas, and like you said, I think that we've been nurtured to believe that our way of economics is the only way that will work. But that's not necessarily true either, you know. And like you said, maybe we can think outside the box and maybe, you know, come up with a different system. I think morally we are good people, and I think for the most part it's in society's interest to have a community where people aren't poor or starving, and because those type of people are the ones who are going to rob and steal and murder or get addicted to drugs. And so really it's almost in our interest to I know I'm starting to sound like a socialist all of a sudden, but it's those isms are what worries me, because it's people throw those words around and then they just dismiss any idea that you know fits in that definition of that title, when really all those words have things that make sense about them. You know, if I shared some ideas about capitalism with somebody who isn't, you know, doesn't like capitalism or communism, and they might say, hey, that makes sense. But I think that we end up just kind of looking at the word and saying, oh yeah, you're a socialist, you're this, you're that, and we kind of dismiss it. And I really think we should start just look at ideas and see what works, and like you said, maybe look at things outside the box, maybe do a combination of things, maybe don't do with any of them, and start from scratch. And is there any alternatives that you see people doing maybe in other countries that you think might be something that would be worth looking into, or some, you know, maybe a good option for the future?
Oh, that's always a difficult question. I mean, I think there's lots of interesting things going on in pockets. I don't know if there's one sort of system, certainly not at the level of political system, I would say is working. Perhaps some of the Scandinavian countries. It's really, although, you know, there's certain things you can point to. Certainly other countries are doing a better job than Canada and the US at regulating environmental issues and regulating companies doing harm. Or incentivizing alternatives. I don't have the hard numbers, but I was in a discussion where someone recently talking about, of all the alternative energy experiments, the vast majority of them are being supported by the German government. You know, if our governments would actually do something like that, it could have a huge impact. But there's this lobby that's sort of stuck in the old resource extraction because of corporate lobbying. So I don't know if it's very useful to sort of imagine an entire system that would be better, the sort of utopia idea. I think it's almost like we need to have a multi-pronged strategy to support alternatives, you know, dispersed alternatives, which would in particular, I think, include renewable energy alternatives, and to at the same time regulate corporations. You know, if those two were both happening, and I mean regulate them with real teeth, like stop just giving them tiny slaps on the wrist and actually do something of significance to control their behavior. And then when it comes to the nature of the corporation, like, I do think there's something to be said for this B corporation idea. And in particular, though, what if we were able to just say, listen, corporate charters cannot externalize the harms they cause to the planet and to people in the way that they have been. Just that would be huge. That would prevent these garment factory fires. That would prevent you know, the kind of outrageous things Monsanto keeps doing. It would also stop them from pouring money into lobbying against labeling when labeling is in the public interest.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can't sort of come up with one thing. I think there's many good people doing good things, but unless we at the same time use our movements to sort of attack the source of the problem, which, as I said, really has to be both the nature of the corporation and the nature of government. You know, like, those two things need to be thought through right now, because they're having a big impact on how we do what we do and on how we organize as well.
Yeah, and I think that every idea, I know socialism has worked in some countries for a short period of time. Capitalism worked in this country for a short period of time. I guess it worked in the, you know, during the Industrial Revolution, even though basically the country was run by a handful of rich, wealthy families that, like you said, are trying to hold on to those resources and keep us dependent on those resources that made them rich. But a lot of these ideas, they work for a short period of time, but they don't seem that it never ends up seeming to last. And yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I think I definitely don't know which idea works best or would work best, but I'm definitely open to all different types of ideas. I definitely think that we have to break this mold and this thinking that this lifestyle we have, this way of this ideology of thinking is the only way it'll work. You know, I think we've been brainwashed to believe that capitalism is a fair way, and it's the way that you know, makes things grow and helps the economy, but it really doesn't. And we have some of the worst income equality in the world. I mean, the 1% was kind of a understatement. You know, it was really like the 0.001%, and that controls most of the U.S.'s wealth. And we have this huge issue with the fact that the middle class keeps shrinking. So as the middle class keeps shrinking, they're the ones who basically have money to spend to help corporations actually become wealthy and grow. So as they outsource stuff, you know, as we out, you know, now we have big corporations like Walmart who has a monopoly on things and really just importing everything from China. So now there's even less need for factories in the U.S. So it just eventually something has to give, because we can't keep shrinking the middle class, which usually spends most of their paycheck, unlike, you know, the rich who pay very little taxes and just reinvest and do a really good job of spending, you know, hiding money and whatnot. So it definitely, something has to give. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do like the path that we're taking, that it does seem like we're getting more free stuff, and we're getting more used to getting free stuff than ever. You know, the Zeitgeist movement, the idea is it's interesting to me, because in a way, we're moving towards a place where we are becoming more used to getting things for free, which is I think a great way of thinking. You know, not everything has to be paid for. Where, you know, that's why I think net neutrality is so important, because I think that
it's so critical, because we need the internet to organize, because I mean, I've always sort of seen that as a great tool, and yet of course it's also, you know, the great tool for conspiracy as well. But I absolutely think that's a critical issue. There's actually a great film. Now I'm losing my train of thought. Just pause for a minute.
Yeah, is it a great film about net neutrality?
Mark described it as. Let me just pause for a second. I'm going to get this right. I don't want to.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Aha! Yes, another Canadian film, Shadows of Liberty.
Oh, I just ordered that DVD. That's hilarious that you bring that up. Yeah, I just ordered that DVD. I don't know anything about it, but the trailer just blew me away. You Canadians are doing good work up there.
Well, they're not based here anymore. I think they're based in the UK, but it is Canadian director. I was going to say about that film, Mark described it as a taking up where manufacturing consent left off, because it's very deep in it, but it's looking at how dangerous this whole situation can be too, in terms of when you try to expose what's going on, in terms of the interests that want to fight having a free media, you know, a media that truly is freedom of the presses, whatever that means in the digital age. Yeah. So I think that film combined with
manufacturing consent.
That with manufacturing consent still stands, but this takes it into the internet age. Yeah. That would be the best place to put it.
So it's more of almost a modern version of manufacturing consent.
In some ways, I mean, manufacturing consent is looking at Noam Chomsky and his thoughts on this. This is more case studies of many different whistleblower types. Anyway, it's a very good film, and I'm glad you've ordered it. Yeah, they're great. I want to go a little bit back, move away for a minute from that discussion, though, and just talk a little bit about the idea, what you were saying a minute ago about things being free. That's one of the reasons that we're doing this crowdfunding campaign with the platform that we're doing it on. So it's just beta, and we haven't quite launched yet. We're working out the bugs, but by the time this podcast airs, we will be full blown on our crowdfunding campaign. And it's on a platform called Dana.io, Dana.io, which is based on this Buddhist idea of giving that's less about, what are you going to get for it, and about the spirit of it, this idea of pay it forward. So our entire campaign is really trying to be much like that, a pay it forward campaign. We're asking for support from people so that we can actually give the film for free, and so that we can do a lot of work for free, or at least free to those who benefit from it, rather than just having a model where we charge people money for services and we deliver those services. And I think that's a really great model for raising money to do the kind of work we're doing, rather than trying to quantify it all in a different way. So we're hoping that this platform will be a good situation for us to do it a little differently, because they don't charge. They're not a corporation with taking their cut for this. They're going to base it on who wants to give back to them, and money that they get that goes beyond their own operating costs, they're going to put into keeping the platform free for other people to use.
Yeah, and I think that's the wave of the future. I think we're becoming more used to getting, finding different ways of making money, different ways of we're getting more things for free, like I said, and I think it's a good sign. I think it's a good sign. I think that people are getting. I mean, it's amazing how motivated people are. For other reasons besides financial, we always assume that, without financial motivation, without any motivation to gain money or more money, then there goes our motivation to basically come out with a new innovation and stuff like that. But I don't think that's the case. I think some of the most motivated people are really passionate about their work and what they're putting out and things like that. And I think that's so important. I bring up Nikola Tesla because he's a perfect example, one of the greatest inventors that most people don't know too much about, but he was completely motivated by his work. He was motivated by trying to make the world a better place and his legacy, and not so much how much money can I make off this, and that's kind of where JP Morgan kind of made stop funding him, because really he saw him as a threat in his process of making more money. So I think it's deceiving. I think corporations tell people that or convince us that we need this money incentive to keep growing and to give you the best products, but in a way we're not always getting the best products either. They're gonna make sure they give us something that's slightly better and doesn't last that long, so then we keep buying. Because really, you look at the 90s in the U.S. for cars, and 80s and 70s, U.S. Manufacturers, they were awful. They didn't last. Everybody knew once your car got in higher miles, everything was going to fall apart. And it was by design. It wasn't by mistake. There's not an incentive in making something last forever. And that happens, and that type of thinking ends up polluting everything from medicine. I had Dr. Gregory A. Smith from the film American Addict, and we talked about even Dr. Brzezinski, who there's no incentive, and Chris Rock said it best in one of his stand-up specials. There's no money in a cure. There's a money in giving somebody a pill for the rest of their lives. And when everything starts being looked at as a business, then I think it causes a huge issue. So, and that's a cool thing about the corporation. It hits on so many of those little stories from Agent Orange and Monsanto to banking to all these other little stories that it really, and like you said, it gets to the root of the issue, and really the idea that corporations are people, they're only people when it's in their interest, because they're not people when they kill people. If me or you killed somebody, we go to prison. If a corporation kills somebody knowingly, and at times they've been known for that to happen, just like the GM thing we said recently. It's the same thing. Nobody gets locked up, and we always look at criminals as maybe somebody with tattoos or a biker or a gangster, but nobody looks at a white collar, tie suit as a criminal. But that person is a criminal. The street criminal might steal a purse from a little old lady. He steals from one person. But some of these criminals, these white collar criminals, steals billions and millions from taxpayers and many of people. So I think we have to kind of start looking at changing the way we look at criminals and what we define as a criminal, because a lot of these, like I said, a lot of these suit and ties, they're just as bad, if not worse, than a lot of these gangsters or bikers or whoever. And at the end of the day, you know, the prison system is designed to put those guys in jail and not the white collar guys. So it's an issue we definitely have to resolve. Getting money out of politics, I definitely think is a great start.
Yeah.
You know, would you say that would
absolutely
be step in the
first banksters incarcerate the banksters?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's everybody. I mean, even Obama, for example, he got tons of money from Goldman Sachs and from bankers. But how do you think? Is there? Do you have any opinions on what's the? Well, obviously, getting money out of politics is a great start. But a lot of people believe that lobbying is one of those things where corporations or companies should be able to, I guess, share their opinions on certain laws and things that are passing. But, you know, I forget who it was. I had one libertarian on my show, and I agree with a lot of libertarian views. But he was talking about how lobbying is a right. You have the right to, you know, if there's a law that's passing that's going to affect your industry or your company, you have the right to, you know, I guess put in your 2 cents. But I'm like, well, isn't lobbying kind of unfair when lobbying basically only works for people who can afford lobbyists, so everybody else is kind of screwed. So the only voice that is heard is the rich.
But it's not even just that bad. If it was even as simple as affording or not affording to lobby, but there's active and cutthroat ways in which they prevent effective counter lobbying, and that's the thing we do have to realize. And you don't have to be. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist because I don't think things are organized enough for there to be that kind of conspiracy. But I think it's right out there in the open that corporate interests will stop at very little to prevent opposition. So what that means is when other people, groups and coalitions start to become effective, they get targeted. And that is a very real thing that's going on. So I think that this is why it's really important to get money out of politics, because there needs to be some mandate for the democratic process to protect citizens who try to, you know, band together and be participatory in their democratic process against some of these corporate lobbyists. And that is really the crux of it, I think. So there needs to be equal right to have that voice heard, and that's where money is not just buying the voice, it's silencing other voices.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And there's politicians that sometimes don't even see the bill itself, and they end up backing it. You know, the lobbyists will end up telling them what language to put in the bill that they're looking for, or they're the ones who tell them what part of the bill to highlight, and you know. So there's the problem with politics is that there's too many, and I think, like you said, there is a need for government, because if not, then who's going to regulate these big corporations? So we do need, and that's the thing. There's always, like, we look at, you know, a lot of times we try to look at things from, or they try to convince us to look at things from a conservative liberal view or a black and white view, and I think that there's a big gray area. I don't think we need more government. I don't think that we need less, you know, or getting rid of all government will fix the problem. I think that we need
more effective government that's actually answering to the people. I think I'm a Canadian observing the U.S., but I see a lot of disappointment in what's gone on in your country. You know, change has not come. It has been really the opposite. And I mean, films like Dirty Wars and Shadows of Liberty really talk about that, because if you're looking at things from an international perspective, things have gotten far more dangerous under Obama than they were before.
Oh, absolutely. I have a lot of family in Portugal. I was born in Portugal, and I basically spent most of my life in the States, but I still have a lot of family overseas, and we go overseas, and people's perspective of this country is amazing, because even though Obama initially, I think he did a great job of convincing people that, hey, you know, this is different. You know, we had this you know, war crazy Republican from the South, you know, from an oil family, and I'm, you know, completely different than what we're used to, and I think for PR reasons, for perspective from the rest of the world looking in, it looked like things are going to be different. But like you said, things haven't changed. You know, our drone issue has only expanded. You know, he re-signed the Patriot Act. You know, he tried to. I mean, honestly, he's just as bad, if not worse, than Bush when it comes down to trying to sell us wars. Because I mean, he tried to get us in Syria. He's trying to sell invading Iran. He's trying to basically start a second Cold War with Russia. And even though Russia's not, I mean, I'm not defending Russia because believe me, Putin's no saint either. But at least it's his territory, and it's before we just start getting involved in conflicts, we should really understand them. And I think that's a big problem with the U.S. is that we're in this world where we kind of feel like everything revolves around us, and then we get involved in conflicts that we don't really quite understand.
Yeah, and I think that's part and parcel of, let's name it for the larger problem it is. It's not capitalism, it's corporate globalization. And that corporate globalization has just strengthened the already there tendencies of empire building, right, which are not new. But it is just those two forces combined are what threatens the planet right now. Yeah,
I definitely agree, and I think that and that's the thing about conspiracy. I mean, I'm not sure there is one huge, new world order that's trying to.
It's not. The thing is, it's not a conspiracy at all. It's quite out there in the open. That's why I don't think much of conspiracy theories. I think more like follow the evidence, and then look what happens when people uncover evidence that isn't in the interest of those that are trying to hide it. And that's all out in the open. That's all out in the open right now, especially since WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden. So there, it's business as usual taken to an extreme that we can't afford at this point in history. And climate change is the harbinger that none of us can really avoid dealing with at the moment. But I'm old enough now to remember that we've been saying these things for years and years and years, decades. And some of the predictions are finally happening. And what I really worry about is that the younger generation, which is one of the reasons we really want to relaunch the film too, because I think it's really important to start a movement that involves the younger generation. And if we can get this into schools, if we can activate college-age people around it, we can really start to do something with the analysis that's there. But I think that the analysis it's only gotten worse, not better. So it's not like it's out of date at all. It's just that now it needs to be acted upon by new audiences.
Yeah. And to go back to what I was saying about the New World Order, I think you're absolutely right. It's not a hidden conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. Like you said, you can just look at it, and in the movie, it has all these individual stories of just corporations and people trying to make more money, and
it's business as usual.
Yeah,
it's not a conspiracy.
Yeah,
but it's something that we need to question with every tool we have. And so that is where that is, but that's also why it's at when I talked about the merging of sort of empire with corporate globalization, that's why looking at it in a utopic example is not enough, because we're unfortunately linked internationally in a way but we're not thinking that way. We're only thinking of moving profit across borders, and literally screwing anyone who gets in our way, right? That's the main business as usual that's going on right now. And I mean, some of the other things that really, we can talk about climate change as a huge issue, which it is, but you look at some of these other things too. Like, one of my favorite things to hate is the example of what's going on with bottled water industry, because we have something that's been. I mean, there are a few places in the world where the water isn't safe to drink, but most of the people drinking bottled water now are in the affluent West, and they've been convinced that the water out of their tap isn't safe, and they're being sold bottled tap water that's being sold and bought. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Find that example. How did that sneak up on us? It snuck up on us because of this perception management of this notion of the water. I think about Nestle Pure, right?
Yeah.
Nestle being one of the dominant forces in trying to buy up water supply and rebottle it and resell it back to us. And it's absolutely, you know, they tried to get away with this with baby formula, and then they got into water, right? And it's really shocking that the very basic things that all people need to live on are being commodified and exploited and plundered like this. Because not only is it ridiculous that they're buying up water supplies to rebottle, to so-called purify and rebottle tap water, and the plastic bottle industry is another whole problem.
Yeah.
So those two things, it's like I have stopped buying bottled water. I only drink it under duress because it's so unnecessary. It's one of those absurdities that shouldn't. It's the kind of thing that the government should say this is unnecessary and shouldn't be allowed, instead of running around trying to profit from selling their water to Nestle.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, I'm not a huge fan of the government getting involved with too much, because I think that we just keep giving the government more power and they outlaw this. I mean, we had a problem with, like, in in New York, they try to outlaw the big sodas, and I think that it's just like that's a little overreach. But I do think that people need to realize that, like what you're doing, not buying bottled water, we are biggest weapon, our best way of getting our message across is buying power. It's our purchasing power. It's just us boycotting something. It's us not shopping at Walmart. It's us not going to Subway. It's us going to, you know, supporting local companies. And I think that's so important. I try to do that with every aspect of my life.
Except I mean, I'm absolutely in favor of using your boycott and boycott power, but at the same time, with a very specific thing with Nestle, it's not just that they're making this unnecessary product and we're buying it. That's only one piece of it. Governments, local governments, are selling water supplies to them. That is something that government should be not allowed to do, and that's what I mean by they could be stopping that, not facilitating it.
Yeah, because didn't they have? I think it was Maine that they had an issue with. They were just they were just going there and taking basically free water and then selling it to us in a bottle.
Yeah, and I mean, this issue over these rights to these resources, that's not something that consumer boycotts can address. That is something that there needs to be government regulations and public lobbying and proper consultation, and then the government does need to be an arm of the public will. But you can't kind of leave that stuff to the market, because that is why we have bottled water for sale.
Well, I think you definitely could pick maybe a brand that doesn't do that, you know, and maybe boycott. But I think you're right. I mean, unfortunately, when companies get so big, one, they can lie to us and sell us any idea they want, and two, you know, how many of us actually have time to research everything we're consuming in the first place? You know, we most of us work 9-to-5 jobs. We just try to make ends meet, and we make just enough money to be broke. You know, you have people who work 40 hours a week, but yet can't afford, you know, get government help because they can't afford the necessities. So it just which I think is just a shame. I think nobody who works 40 hours a week should be considered poor. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think and there are, you know, that's when the government should, I think, get involved in situations like that. But I definitely agree that we need a little bit of both. I think money talks, and I think that, you know, you look at the gluten-free thing. I think that got big because people started eating gluten-free or the organic foods, for example. I think that it's not because these companies actually care about trying to get us good quality food. It's because people were buying it and looking for it, and they can make money selling it. So I'm not speaking for all companies, but I think for most of the big ones and a lot of companies. I mean, like you said, when a company becomes public, your one purpose is to make money. It's the bottom line, and to make quarterly gains. It's against the law not to. So you need to keep your stockholders happy, and really the long-term effects of decisions don't really matter anymore. So I definitely agree, but I think that purchasing power is definitely a good start. You know, support local companies. I mean, if you can find local restaurants, local shops, I mean, support them. I'd rather pay a little more and support a local guy than give my money to Walmart or whatever. When, you know, you guys had a scene in the corporation when, you know, they were comparing how much something was sold for compared to how much it cost to make it, or how much people were getting paid to make it, and it was ridiculous. You had a $180 sports coat that, you know, cost 40 cents to make. You know, so it's just, definitely have a huge issue. And there's a similar story to that in I don't know if you ever saw Casino Jack or about Jack Abramoff, but about some politicians finding some offshore island that was, I think, technically the U.S. but yet had its own rules. It didn't follow the minimum wage rules and stuff of the U.S., the labor laws. So they basically could put labels on clothes that said, yeah. So it's just it's a huge issue. And yeah, I think that getting money out of politics is a great start. I think choosing where you spend your money wisely is a good start. I know there's a couple of apps for your phone like Boycott and a couple other ones that help you choose companies. You can scan a code on a company on a product and actually see if there's any complaints on them or any research on them and stuff, and or any GMOs and like you said, the other thing too is it's like that movie we talked about, Manufacturing Consent. That title is so important because even with the GMO thing that happened in California, the idea of voting to put GMO labels on our food seems like a pretty cut and dry decision. Yes, we want to know that if there's GMOs in our food or not. But when there's big corporations who can pay for marketing and pay to put all these commercials to scare people, in California's case, scare them to believe that if they
and I think Monsanto put in, I heard a figure of something like $33 million into countering that.
Wow. Yeah. And
coalitions of activists raised a lot of money. I think something in the tune of 8 million, but 8 million versus 33 million. And I see that going on. I'm not sure what the ads are like in the US, but over the Keystone XL and the Enbridge stuff here, there's propaganda ads in every venue. The Canadian government is spending a fortune on this right now. But they're spending all this money because the grassroots movement is being effective. So they're essentially wasting taxpayers' money to try to change our minds about things.
Yeah, we got actually some, even at our construction company's office, we got some faxes and emails talking about, how many jobs the Keystone Pipeline was going to create, and we should support it and sign this and sign that. I'm like, who are you? I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, you're trying to get us, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, there'll be a lot of people who just look at it and like, oh, it's going to create jobs. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. But
that's the shock doctrine that's coming from the 2008 crash and from the very, very real situation of many people seeing their funding dry up. And what I've been kind of calling lately the activist or the artist shock doctrine, where all the old traditional money is just drying up because even a lot of progressive people lost money. So there's this feeling of inevitability that there's no escaping some corporate dollars somewhere because other opportunities aren't arising. But all of these things are all the symptoms. I mean, that's why I would say part of the solution right now is not only dealing with the symptoms, but dealing with some of the roots of the problem, which I think still do go back to not only what we talked about with regulation, reclaiming democracy and regulating government, regulating corporations, but also taking aim at their corporate charters. So that's some of the things that's going on with the move to amend folks and people like that. And I think there's something to that because with Citizens United, this has become a huge issue, like not a fringy conspiracy theory issue. It's out there. And why don't we change the corporate charters? Why don't we stop this charade of the way they're protected under these charters?
Yeah, and the thing about a lot of those fringe conspiracy theories is that there's a lot of truth to a lot of them. It's like you start doing your research and you realize the reason why they stick around, or the reason why these conspiracy theories end up getting so much attention or so many people believing into it, is because there's a lot of truth in a lot of them. There's hints of truth in a lot of these things, and there might not be just one big boogeyman, but like you said, it's business as usual. People and I think that when you look at Monsanto, when you look at a lot of these big companies, they have a bunch of people working for this company, and everybody's doing their little role, and they might not necessarily know the harm that they're doing, and it's just everybody's going to work, everybody's doing their job. One person's looking at the quarterly gains, another person's focused on marketing, and so it's not just one big boogeyman. Even though that probably some companies that CEOs do know what they're doing, and I know that they had the issue when, I don't know if you heard about in India, when they had Bayer had a cancer drug that India basically had a rule that if you have a patent and if it's too expensive, they can basically say, screw your patent, we can make a generic version of it. And that's what they did. And then Bayer tried to sue India, saying that they can't. Basically, it was like $1,300 a month or something, some ridiculous amount of money for Bayer's medicine, and they made the same medicine for like $100 a month or $50 a month, something insane. And then the CEO of Bayer came out and said, "Oh wait, our drug wasn't designed for India; it was designed for Western countries that could afford it," and because they were talking about why it was so pricey. So I think in some cases there probably is a evil CEO that knows exactly what he's doing. But I think that when
that's just the point. He's just doing what he's supposed to under the legal charters of corporations. So it doesn't excuse him, but it's kind of that is why. And so if we were able to change the charters, there'd be more ways to go after corporations make them behave more ethically, or at least do less harm. Those two things.
Is there any one issue that really motivates, or you know how like a lot of activists and people who are involved in alternative media and documentaries, they have one issue that really it's the issue that really bothers them the most, that really motivates them the most to get involved. Is there one issue with you specifically, or is there just I
think the only issue with me specifically is I really don't like to feel like there's no hope for alternatives, and I think that's why going to the root of the problem is important to me. And my hope is that through the attention the film is drawing, and still is drawing, we can gather some of that momentum that we had when it launched back again with new people to support many different movements that are all working towards aspects of the same end. Because I firmly believe that while some organizations are rightly focused on their area of concern, we need a network where many of these issues are being tackled at the same time. And in particular, like I've been calling it the 3 Rs, but I think there's something to be said for simultaneously working around changing the corporate form itself, rewriting it. Let's not leave it in this form that's so prone to doing bad things. And let's also work at reclaiming democracy. Personally, I've always been describing myself as a cooperative anarchist, aka Chomsky style, but I firmly believe in being involved in government, being participatory, and then not letting their bad decisions stop me from talking about what I think matters, or even engaging potentially in civil disobedience around it. But I think there's an important thing to say, that we need to be democratically active. That's important. And the other is, yes, support the people within the business community that want to see change. Just make sure that things don't just get reduced to convenient greenwashing that becomes another form of spin, because that is what can happen.
Yeah, and you know what, I completely agree. I think that we definitely, the message that you've brought up a few times that I think is really important is we have to rethink things, and I think there's nothing wrong with saying that, hey, this system isn't working, and I'm not sure that a couple little fixes here or there are going to necessarily fix the problem, because I think that having only two parties involved in the debates and really only two parties that really is in the conversation when election time comes.
And in the face of the kind of money and power that corporations can wield when they feel like things are being not going their way, I think it's really important for people to be working together. And if there's any way that we can reclaim the brand power of the do-gooders and use our corporation film brand to help, that's what I hope will happen with what we move forward with. And that could be as simple as becoming a bit of a network that we can help launch campaigns for our organizations that become part of our network. And that could be a really great way to get more power behind, in numbers, behind certain issues. But more deeply, like I think that one of the advantages of representing a film like The Corporation is that it doesn't have an overly simplified message. And I think that's actually gives us more openings to reach beyond the certain converted choir in any given corner. And I think that's one of the things that activists need, is they need more mainstream support for things, because that's where a lot of them have They may have built up big lists of people that have signed on to one of their issues, but they aren't necessarily reaching out to those that don't already agree with them.
Yeah, yeah. I know Occupy kind of got some flack for not really having one focused issue, but I think that it worked in their favor. I think that they were.
Well, I think you do. I think it's equality. I mean, if you're going to come down to one demand, it's equality.
Yeah, yeah.
That to me was clear from Occupy. And I think all this nonsense that you hear from critics about there being no clear vision is just them not looking at what should have been the biggest and best focus group ever. What do people want? They want the world to be more fair.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah, you're right.
And,
yeah.
and it should be more fair. And what is stopping it? Well, governments under the thrall of corporate lobbying, corporations who are profit-making machines, that's what's keeping the world from being more fair. And that's not a conspiracy. It's written in their charters. So let's change those charters.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely agree. I think that, and the thing is, it's people will. I remember people going to Occupy, like Peter Schiff and other people, and saying, oh, they don't really have a clear message. But you're right. It was equality. It was the fact that they might not have a solution to fix the problem, but they're saying that there's a lot of problems and we need to fix something, and things aren't right, and you know, basically the issue is equality, and what is causing it isn't that simple, you know, and what's a solution probably isn't that simple. But at the end of the day, they were just saying, hey, we're angry and something needs to be done. And I think that's something we could all back. I agree. Yeah. So, Kat, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you're a busy person. This campaign, it's going to start off. When exactly is you're going to start the campaign?
Well, let's just say, for the sake of argument, we're going to launch our crowdfunding campaign on Monday, the 26th, with the anniversary screening of The Corporation here in Vancouver. If any of you folks are listening to it in Vancouver, please come. You can find information at thecorporation.com. And the crowdfunding platform, as I mentioned before, is a new platform called Dana.io, which is a fee-free platform for activists and authors and people like us. Troublemakers like us. And what we're really hoping to achieve with this campaign is to raise $50,000, which will enable us to gift the film to 1,000 schools. And then if we were to reach our stretch goal of 75 or even 100,000, we would be able to launch a pilot of micro documentaries, which are bringing new content into the conversation and doing updates on issues from the film and people within the film. So we can do some pilots of that. And the overall goal, beyond even the crowdfunding, is to sustain ongoing work to do much of what we've been talking about in this interview today, to really connect organizations and individuals who want to see a change so that we can mobilize by having more numbers. And to that end, what we hope to do is launch a pledge to get up off the couch. Good old Michael Moore at the end of the film said he knows a few people are going to get up off the couch and do something, and that's what our campaign is. It's the Corporation Off the Couch, Get Up Off the Couch campaign.
Yeah.
And with that pledge, our overall long-term vision is to end up with a million people who make that pledge, and by doing that, they're going to get free access to a lot of the materials we'll create. But we really want to be able to, on behalf of all of our allies and partners and do-gooder friends, be able to mobilize people around particular actions at different times around these issues.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's all. People who haven't watched the film, please go out and find it. I'm sure it's everywhere where you can find. You know, I'm pretty sure it'll probably, if it's not on Netflix, I know it has been on Netflix. Hasn't it?
Yeah, you can see it on YouTube. You can go to thecorporation.com and get a hold of us. But even more exciting, if you contribute to our campaign at a certain level, we'll be gifting back a digital download of the new shorter cut, which you can screen freely in communities and hold your own screenings and use it as a tool for dialogue. That's what our real hope is. And as I said, if we reach our funding goal, we'll also be gifting it to 1,000 schools. So this is a really big goal, which I think will have spin-off effects down the road that will be very positive for getting people to rethink the corporation.
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome idea. The idea of having a shorter version for educational reasons, and maybe to show in classrooms, and so that I think that's a great idea, especially today. Like we said, I think early in the show, people just don't have any attention spans anymore. So having a shorter version probably is a good idea for the younger crowd. But I like I said, we talked about it on the show. I think you'll be surprised how entertaining they make the message, with all these really interesting stories, with all these clips, with just a lot of good interviews. I mean, Howard Zinn's in the movie, like you said, Michael Moore, Noam Chomsky. They have a lot of really interesting people, great minds, and it's a really interesting documentary. And it gets, like you said, it doesn't just talk about the symptoms, but it gets right to the root of the issue and kind of gives you a little history on the idea of the corporation, and really the idea behind the corporation as a entity, and should it be considered a person or shouldn't it, and a bunch of other really, I think, important questions. So thanks, Kat, for being with me. I can't thank you enough for being on. I know we were supposed to have this interview a while back, and I'm glad that we ended up being pushed back so we could do it around the 10-year anniversary, and I'm glad I get to basically be a part of getting the word out, because like I said, this movie was one of the first documentaries that I saw, especially after September 11th, when people, I think, especially the younger crowd, started becoming more aware of what was going on. This was one of my favorites early, and I think now more people are into documentaries now than they probably were at that time, at least people that I surround myself with. But it was one of the ones that really caught my eye and really got me exposed to documentaries, and it was beautifully put together. It's entertaining, which I know some people say documentaries are boring, but definitely not this one. This one's definitely entertaining. I think the 2 hours will fly by pretty quickly, and I hope everybody goes out and checks it out. So thanks again, Kat, and keep in touch, and good luck with everything. I'm really excited for the 10-year anniversary, and I hope that you guys get a bunch of new fans and people who maybe didn't know about the movie the first time around. And the nice thing about Facebook and Twitter and everything else, that you have a new platform to kind of help get the message across.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also add too that you can check out, you can find our crowdfunding campaign on dana.io, DANA.io. You can find links to all of this, of course, at thecorporation.com. And I should also point out too that the filmmakers are Mark Akbar, Jennifer Abbott, and Joel Bakken. And Joel Bakken is also the author of the book The Corporation, and another book called Childhood Under Siege, which looks at corporate targeting of children, and he's actually working on another sequel book as we speak. So do check out our website and get in touch with us. Join our mail list. Soon it will be our pledge to get off the couch list, so that we can, if you're interested, let you know what we're doing, because we also want to talk about new things that the filmmakers are up to. And of course, we hope that organizations and individuals will join us in this 10-year anniversary year of organizing, action, and dialogue, as we've been calling it. So everyone can be part of that. And there is also a link to a short survey on our website, which has been quite inspiring. We only put that up a couple of weeks ago, and we've had well over 100 surveys, some from people who were fans of the film from when it first launched, and the last one was from someone who had it recommended to them 3 weeks ago.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So I mean, we're really not done yet. That's another one of our slogans. But what I really hope right now is that we can get the support of people to take this momentum and really make a difference. Because if we can actually make a difference, if we can change the corporation, we can actually change the world. Yeah, and I think that's a message I try to get across a lot on this show. Is that's why the show's called The Ripple Effect. Is I know all my fans have probably heard this 1,000 times, but I truly believe that we all can cause our own little ripple and make a difference, and no matter how small the difference is or how little the ripple, it can definitely grow and grow and grow, and it's something as simple as sharing an idea with a person over a coffee. All of a sudden you mold his perspective a little differently, he shares it with somebody else, and he shares it with somebody else, and you can have a huge impact without indirectly, without even knowing it. So I think that's really important. The book, The Corporation, the Pathological Pursuit of Profit and Power, I know that's out. I believe that's out already, right? It's he wrote it during, I think, he wrote it during the film being made, and it was out shortly around the same time. So it's out. It's still out. The new book, the other book, Child Under Siege, has been a couple years, and as I said, hopefully before too long there'll be another book, although they take a while to get published. But he's working on a third book now.
Yeah, and what's a Hello Cool World? What exactly is that's your company that you
Yeah.
basically.
Hello Cool World is the company that I formed literally as we were in the filmmakers were looking for money for the corporation to get made. And I decided that I wanted to have a company that operates. I like an ad agency, but completely differently. So we do what an ad agency would do, except that we only do it for social cause projects. And we basically devoted that first year of the film to working around that. I do work for other social cause projects. We've done work on behalf of other films too, and that's always been our goal with the corporation too, is to not hold on to this all for the film, but to support other projects that we think are important. So that's one of the reasons that I formed Hello Cool World, so we would have the ability to work across projects and engage audiences and to provide quality work in terms of perception management on the good side, right? Social branding and using these tools that marketers use, but as we like to say, we promise to use our powers only for good.
Yeah. That's yeah, it's pretty funny how but that's awesome that you basically like get to focus on projects that you believe in and not you're not starting a company just to make profit like we talked about. You're really using the company to support good companies and good projects. So I think that's awesome. So thanks again, Kat. I really appreciate your time. Well, you Canadians, like I said, are doing awesome work. It seems some of my favorite guests are Canadians on the show. It's amazing how much Canadians know about American politics and then what's going on here. So
we're kind of stuck with it, I think.
Yeah, that's true. But it seems like sometimes you guys know what's going on in our country more than some people in our country.
Well, for the Canadians that are listening, we have a very real need to stop Harper now. So there's my Canadian politics comment. We have an out of control prime minister that needs to be replaced. So
yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. I haven't heard too much about about Harper and what's going on up there, but now I'm gonna have to look into it. It's any brief anything happened recently that is in the news that
many things. He's decimating all of the regulatory bodies around environmental protection. He's at war with the First Nations populations and engaging in all kinds of PR spin games right now about all of these things. He's spending tons of money to advocate for this pipeline that nobody wants. And every time you turn, he does. I can say this because it's my opinion. But I think he's awfully psychopathic himself, this prime minister. And he's certainly completely in bed with corporate interests. And his foreign policy, when it comes to foreign policy, he's even worse than Obama. So there you go.
Wow. Yeah, well, I guess I take that back. Now, I don't like all Canadians. We found one I don't like. So
there you go.
It's funny how we don't know too much about, besides obviously Rob Ford, who was making news everywhere. We really don't know much about what happens in Canada. It's amazing how I guess the U.S. ends up having so much effect on so many other countries that it's hard for other countries not to pay attention to what's going on in the U.S. But it's amazing how we kind of live in this box where really we focus on what's going on in our country and like everything else just seems like not important to us. Yeah, but I'm glad that you shared that because hopefully some people look into that and anytime there's any news or any shithead that needs to be exposed, I'm glad that I can do it. So thanks again, Kat, and try to stay. I don't know how the weather up there is in Canada, but
nice right now.
Yeah, it got warm here too. So enjoy the nice weather, and hey, we'll talk again. Hopefully with some future projects, we'll get together and talk some more.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.